This video is only part of an unpaid, unbiased, in-depth review from an average rider's perspective, so check out the rest in the link below at thegoodride.com. If this video helps, please consider subscribing and buying through our links, or even better, become a member on YouTube or Patreon. You'll get exclusive access to video review shorts as we test gear, along with a lot of other perks. So thanks for watching, and I hope this review helps. Welcome to The Good Ride. I'm James Beastie, and I love leeway. That's a run at Mount Bachelor. I also love lamp. And this is Davey Boy, and this is the Yes, Pick Your Line review. We're updating it for 2023 because there's been some changes and some new additions, like the Pick Your Line Uninc. This is the 64 wide that Davey Boy rode.
Yep.
I rode this primarily with Union Atlas and Burton Kendos, and same thing for this one too. Got it in a wide variety of conditions. Got this in some powder, but the file was corrupted.
I got a few powder laps with the Pick Your Line.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
And then I also got it on groomers, and I've had this in a wide variety of construction types over the last few years in the same shape in all kinds of conditions. So I know this board better than most when it comes to how it rides in all conditions. You got powder and...
I got powder, and I took it out on a really good groomer day to see how it carved on the hardpack.
To give you a short summary, the Pick Your Line has changed a little bit this year. It's gone back to more of the construction and the softer flex of the first model in this newer tapered underbite shape that they released, like 4 or 5 years ago now, maybe even more. And it's a little softer, it's a little more mellow, but it's still that same shape and personality that really appeals to somebody who wants a more centered, on-board, tapered, directional, kind of big mountain ride. Personally, this year, I like the stiffer, more poppy, more dynamic, slightly wider ride of the Pick Your Line Uninc better, primarily because it's got more setback on board, and I feel it matches that shape a little bit better, especially in this day and age where so many boards are so tapered and so directional. But the Pick Your Line is still a great choice for those of you who see hard snow and ride a lot of steep terrain and powder.
Yeah, I thought this board was an absolute all mountain, all conditions destroyer. It was amazing.
I wish you could have gotten on the Pick Your Line Uninc.
I know, I do too.
And when it comes to sizing, this 59 is like my perfect size. It works incredibly well for my boot size. Now, in comparison to the Pick Your Line Uninc, you ride this a little shorter and a little wider. This is the 59. And this was a little too big for me. I would prefer a 57. I tried the 55 and that was a little too small. I wanted the 57, but they didn't have that for demo. So I tried the 59, and I'm glad I did because I'm pretty sure the 57 would be just right and closer to the equivalent of the 159 in the regular Pick Your Line. And you rode the 64 wide.
Yeah, I rode the 64 wide. I'm 240, size 12 boots, 6'4", and I thought it was the perfect size for me.
Yeah, and there you have it size-wise. When it comes to shape, this is slightly tapered and directional, but what's interesting is you feel the taper more than many boards with a lot more taper because of this centered on board kind of thing. You can see it's not very set back on side cut or on board. So this tapered underbite, this indention that goes in and then another indention that goes in is really felt when you're set up on reference. And even you feel it a little bit when you're set all the way back. It needs a lot more back foot weight on groomers. Less so on powder, of course, because it's got pretty good directional float for how centered it is. But in comparison to the Pick Your Line Uninc, that felt a little more set back on board. I felt that taper a little bit less, but there's still like the same general shape. The Pick Your Line Uninc is just a little wider and a little more set back in terms of how it feels on snow. Both have a good amount of camber underfoot and rocker in the tail, a little bit less than the nose. The nose has more rocker, and it's a very stable forgiving feel. So it has that camber kind of feel in the way it tracks 1-foot's flat bases, but it doesn't have that camber feel when you want to skid a turn. When you go to skid a turn, it's pretty forgiving and easy. And when you get off your game, it's much easier than camber in terms of how much it'll punish you.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I really thought the on-snow feel for this board was very enjoyable.
And yeah, overall, I think it's a very good all conditions ride in the sense that it has that same consistent personality underfoot no matter what you're riding in.
I think this board, for me, it felt like it almost landed a little bit more on the freestyle side of free ride.
Yeah, totally. And when it comes to edge hold, you have this tapered underbite. Both boards have this, and it's just an indention here and then another indention here, and it acts like magnet traction, even though it's not an extension, it's an indention. That disruption in the side cut grips incredibly well in hard to icy snow. And if you just lean a little bit into that back foot, it's just gonna grip and hold. And I like that feel. It adds to that all conditions ride. So even in ice, it grips as well as feels stable.
Yeah, and I didn't find it to be too catchy either. I thought it was a really good kind of middle ground of definitely gripped in there, but it still allows you to boost out of your turn and get, now you're not too locked into it.
Yeah, and it doesn't grab too much in softer snow either. Yeah. It grabs a little though, and it's something you need to get used to like full magnet traction does, but it's not terrible.
Yeah, it's not quite full magnet traction.
Yeah, it might take a day or two and then all of a sudden you won't think about it anymore. When it comes to flex, you can see there's a much more softer flex.
Yeah.
This just feels medium this year, maybe even bordering on medium soft, and it feels consistent throughout. A little stiffer in the middle, but the nose and tail are definitely soft, and it's got good pop back, and it doesn't feel as chattery as you would think for the softer flex, but this is definitely medium on the medium soft side. Now check this guy out. This took more of the stiffer flex. This is the 59, and between the feet, it's very stiff right here. The nose is softer, but there's something going on here, I'll show you. There's this material right here that stiffens up the nose a little bit and lightens it at the same time. Same thing going on in the tail here. This whole patch has, you can kind of see, shining a light into a pretty studio light. But look at the tail here. The tail is very stiff, and overall it has a nice medium stiff flex in comparison to the Pick Your Line. And I think that's why they made the Pick Your Line regular softer, because you have the Pick Your Line Uninc this year.
And we'll check it out for this big boy, the 64 wide. Yeah, you can see she gets a good flex, but she's pretty stiff. I'm giving that some juice. No.
So it's weight appropriate.
Yeah, it is weight appropriate for sure. Nose and tail, nice and stiff. This board's got some pop.
Yeah, both boards are very poppy. This board is super easy to ollie. I had no problem with it. Very easy to butter this year. Much more easier than last year's Pick Your Line. And even the Pick Your Line Uninc is easy to butter because of the rocker before the nose and tail. Allows you a little more easy leverage before you lean into it. But this thing is just a buttery, playful, kind of like almost mountain freestyle flex and personality in a tapered directional shape, which goes back to what you were saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I definitely feel that.
Yeah, and in comparison to the Pick Your Line Uninc, that has more pop and it's very easy to access. That just the construction and that stiffer flex along with the higher end materials just makes it poppy without being too chattery and too poor to ride in uneven snow. And even with the softer flex, when I got this in uneven terrain, yeah, it can buck and bounce around a little more, especially compared to a lot of other freeride boards, but it's still very manageable, especially if you slow down a little bit and just play around and have fun with it. This can still just handle everything from micro bumpy snow without ever really getting cranky. It'll chatter a little bit, but it won't come up into you. And to messy snow, and it's the same thing. It'll chatter, it might buck and bounce you a little bit more because of this poppy, softer flex, but it's still gonna be very doable, very manageable if you get used to this board and you know how to ride it.
Yeah, I mean, I personally didn't really have any problems with the chatter.
When it comes to speed and base glide, I thought the Pick Your Line Uninc and the Pick Your Line had very similar base glide. It's a fast base, but it's not the fastest. It's like sister company Jones. They just seem to have a little faster bases than Yes, but these are fast bases and they work really well. I didn't really notice much of a difference between the Pick Your Line Uninc and the Pick Your Line. There might be a different spec, but on snow, when both were waxed, I didn't really notice. And when both weren't waxed, I didn't really notice much of a difference base glide wise, but they both are like upper tier.
Yeah, I thought this board was a bomber.
You did?
Yeah,
cool.
I did. Yeah, I felt really comfortable at high speeds, and it felt like it carried speed well. Definitely some boards you notice, you're like, oh god damn, this thing is slow, but this one was cruising for me.
Yeah, and this is damper than you would think for its flex, but if you like to go a little bit faster, it's definitely about the Pick Your Line Uninc versus these two.
I'd imagine.
And I wondered, I think they make a 62 in the Pick Your Line Uninc. If they do, that would be a fun comparison to the 64 wide.
Yeah, that would be blast.
When it comes to turn initiation, this is quick. The Pick Your Line is super fast. It's faster than the Pick Your Line Uninc. And it's just like, if you're going through a steep tree run, this is a great board for that because you can just kind of tree slalom really well. And the Pick Your Line Uninc, if you size down, is still very doable. I'd say this is fast. This is kind of more medium fast, bordering on medium. But once you get these boards on edge, they still have a pretty turny side cut. They're on the turny side of balanced, where you can circle carve, you can across the groomer carve really well. But if you want to do a more longer, drawn out, kind of almost straight liney kind of turn, you can do that as well. And I just love how it pops well edge to edge too. You can really just like jump turn well if you want with these. And you feel a little more camber than you would think from looking at its camber profile, because it does have a lot of rocker in the nose and tail. So I just liked it. It's not the most amazing turning experience. There are other boards that I like better. But if you lean back hard into the tail, into your turns to keep that tail from washing on a really committed carve, this will spring out of the turn really well. There's good grip. It's a good all conditions carver. Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, I liked it too. I thought it was really fun to carve. Edge to edge speed was really quick for being a wide board, and it didn't feel quite like a 64 once I got it on edge too. I thought it was a little bit more manageable and nimble than I was expecting it to be.
Yeah, and when it comes to powder, this is a good board, but it's more for steep terrain powder. It is not a low angle powder kind of ride like we see at Mount Bachelor. When I lived in Mammoth and I rode a lot of steeper terrain and powder, when it was open, this thing excelled. But it's got that centered on board feel. Even when set all the way back, I think it's only like 2.5 inches back from center of board, which isn't a lot for a free ride board. That's like kind of almost there with, let's say, the Yes Basic Uninc and the Yes Standard Uninc and the Yes Standard. Those are like 2.25 inches back from center of board, which is really good for an all mountain board, but 2.5 inches back from center of board isn't very good for a free ride, a tapered directional free ride board. I think this is like the Yes Pick Your Line Uninc is like over 3. It's just like 3.125 or 3.25 or something back from center of board. And I really like that. What I would love to see with this, and I know Yes does this with a lot of their boards, is add a setback insert. Yeah, both these, I would love that. That would really round out this board, and it would compete more with boards like Stratos from Jones or the Jones flagship that now has setback inserts. Just why not do that with these? You do it with a lot of other boards. I think it would really help with directional float, especially in low angle powder that a lot of resorts see.
Yeah, I think if you added another setback insert or two, it would open this board up to a good amount more of the market.
Yeah, and overall, I think this is still a very fun board. This year, I like the Pick Your Line Uninc a lot better, but I want this board. This is going to be a favorite, but I think this is still a great board. It's a little more niche this year because the industry has gone more set back for free ride boards, and this has stayed the same. So the industry has changed so much over the years. So we keep changing the way we see the Pick Your Line based on how the industry changes. So now it's kind of a great tapered directional mountain freestyle to big mountain freestyle kind of ride, where I think a lot of people who want a little more setback, a little stiffer board, a little better low angle powder float will appreciate the Pick Your Line Uninc. I even like the turning experience a little better. Whatever they got going on with this core personality really pops and springs and just has a more dynamic feel underfoot without feeling too chattery. So for me, it's Pick Your Line Uninc this year, but the Pick Your Line is still an incredible board and it's still very recommendable.
Yeah, I would highly recommend the Pick Your Line. I think it's a great option if you're looking to hit powder jumps.
Giving advice on YouTube is very difficult because I need a lot of info from you to actually help. So if you want real advice, fill out the Me Harmony profile in the link below so I can help you properly.